How's it going, everyone? Welcome back. Everyone's having a lovely day. The Bengals today cleaning some house after finishing 9-8, not going to make playoffs. Seeing some coaching changes, a lot of coaching changes. Going to get a new linebacking coach, going to get a new defensive line, offensive line, a new defensive coordinator, and a lot of talks and a lot of looks. And maybe it's just me looking for something. But I wonder how often you see a head coach 6 years into his tenure doing such a coaching overhaul and still having a job. Because at the end of the day, we know who hires these guys. That would be your head coach. Your head coach is the one trying to bring these guys in. And to have that many bad coaches under you says a lot about your coach's decision making. That being said, let's talk about the Lou Anarumo thing. Lou Anarumo, before we dig too deep into it, right? I liked Lou, but I also see why they had to get rid of him. This is a guy. There was a really small window. There was a couple-year window where the defense was really good under Lou Anarumo, and even really good was, I think they only had the 1 year where they finished top 10 in yards allowed. There was always a defense that seemed to allow a lot of yards. That was always the Lou Anarumo way, though, was, hey, bend but don't break. We'll allow the yards, we just want to force a field goal. Or we'll allow the yards, we just want to force a turnover. But the first couple years and the last 2 years, when you're finishing 25th, 27th, 29th, whatever in yards allowed per game, you can't stop anybody, you can't get off the field. That's difficult. And that you can see why people say, okay, Lou's got to go. When you look at Lou Anarumo's time with the Bengals, when you see it for 6 years, and you can look and you got to be careful because you always believe in the young guys. But if you entered this season and you said, hey, in 5 years, Lou Anarumo has not developed one single young, talented guy. You felt like Jordan Battle could have been that guy, or maybe Cam Taylor-Britt, and Cam Taylor-Britt kind of fell on his face, kind of bounced back later in the year. But Jordan Battle didn't even get a play to start the season. He had such little confidence in Jordan Battle, he didn't get a play. And I think that was a big thing was, hey, you got to be able to sure, the front office swings and misses a lot, but somewhere in there you had to be able to develop some players. And I know that heavily looks brightly on Lou Anarumo. And more importantly, even if they could have been good players, Lou never played them. Remember how long it took Jordan Battle to get into the lineup? It took some of these young guys to get opportunities to play. It took injuries. It took Sheldon Rankins being gone for how long? They didn't really get the opportunity. That shines brightly on Lou Anarumo, saying, hey, I have confidence in these veterans that already know what they're doing. I don't know if I can properly develop these young guys. Again, I get it. I get it completely why the Bengals say, hey, okay, we're going to move on from Lou Anarumo. We're going to try something else. I do have to, you got to give Lou his props, though. And this is why it stings for me. Love that Dan Pitcher's name's not brought up because I thought he did an excellent job this year as first year's offensive coordinator. But when you look at the games, and why I think the wrong coaches are being fired. I mean, they all could have went, again, minus Dan Pitcher as far as I'm concerned, but including the head coach. But the reason I think of what I think about is the thing that Lou Anarumo's defenses were very good at was being clutch. The Bengals offense has not been clutch under Zach Taylor. Really, ever. The kicker was there for a little bit and they went to the Super Bowl. But when you look at I shouldn't say ever because there was a little bit of time, but even then, you rely on the kicker. There was a little bit of time there where they was finding ways to win games, probably again when it was hot, when it was in the Super Bowl run. But it's been oftentimes, if you watch these games, especially this season, prime example, Baltimore. Both teams, I know people love to bring up, hey, Bengals defense gives up 30 points a game. What are you supposed to do? It's not the offense's fault. Well, Baltimore's defense, close to halfway through the season was horrendous. They was the worst pass defense in the league. They was giving up 30-plus points at will, too. Baltimore's 3-0 in games where he gave up 30-plus points. Bengals haven't won one all year. Think about that. Blame on defense all you want, but the great coach teams, the great teams in general, they find ways to win these games. At least a couple. To go over, some of the blame's got to go on the offense. And the reason I like to go to Baltimore is a prime example, because let's look at the last 6 drives in the game the Bengals lost to the Baltimore Ravens. You had the Bengals interception thrown by the Bengals. Baltimore comes in, kicks the field goal. All right. Bengals get the ball back. They punt. Baltimore gets the ball back in overtime. They go ahead. Bengals had what, about a minute and a half to go down the field, score. They had to settle for the punt. Baltimore gets the ball in overtime. Bengals defense forces a fumble. Bengals offense comes out, misses a field goal. Baltimore wins the game. The Bengals offense had 3 times to come up clutch and close the door on the Baltimore Ravens. They didn't. Bengals defense gave them a couple chances. Yeah, they gave up a gazillion points, could not stop Baltimore all game. But when the game got tight and they needed to stop, they needed to make some plays, they forced the field goal, they forced the turnover. And the Bengals, the offense could not capitalize. We have seen this time in and time again in the Zach Taylor era. You want to go more this season where we say, hey, the Bengals offense has played to the level of the defense. When the defense gives up 30, they score 30. When the defense gives up 5, they score 7. Look at the last 2 weeks. Bengals defense gives up 7 to Pittsburgh. They have 13 going into halftime, settled for 2 field goals. Offense went up and down the field to start the game. Defense makes some stops, and offense, what happens? They can't pick up 4th downs. They find ways to kick field goals, whatever. Denver. Defense gives up 3 points the entire first half. Offense scores 7 points. Consistently. If you remember, again, we go back to the Super Bowl run when everything was clicking. If you remember, there were multiple games where the Bengals offense was non-existent in the first half. How many times they went into the second half 10-3, 14-7, 10-7, 7-7, whatever. The reason it was down 3 scores to Kansas City and had to come back and win those games because the offense did not exist in the first half. And that is, again, a testament to none other than Zach Taylor, the man that thinks he's got to call the plays, the man that has the biggest mastermind in the NFL right now. Nobody can read a defense. Nobody can scheme up the plays. Nobody can draw up the matchups better than Joe Burrow right now. Joe Burrow is your modern Peyton Manning. Meanwhile, you have a head coach that does not want to drop the playbook. Let somebody else call some more plays. Because I tell you what, if Joe Burrow is calling the plays under 5 minutes in the fourth quarter, do we truly believe the Bengals lose all of these games? Bengals defense, speaking of games, New England's game comes up a lot. 16-10, no reason to lose to a bad team. Hurt Joe Burrow or not hurt Joe Burrow, 16-10 against a bad football team. That wasn't the defense's fault. There was a clear, and this is where I, again, worry about the whole Zach Taylor. There's a clear miscommunication. It was 3rd and 10. Joe Burrow dumped it off for 5 yards. Joe Burrow's not dumping it off for 5 yards if he thinks they're punting on 4th down with 3 minutes left. Zach Taylor sends the punting unit out and says, let's get the defense to make one more stop. Game's over. Horrible call. You had the Denver game. Couple bad mistakes, poorly coached mistakes late in this football game. You had the botched timeout. You had the let's throw a pass to the sidelines, drawn up play, stop the clock for him there. Bad calls. Pittsburgh, 3rd and 15. Should have settled and said, hey, we're declining the penalty. They're 4th and 15. They already showed they was going to take the field goal. Instead, Zach says, take the holding, 3rd and 25. If Pittsburgh tried at all to pick up a pass interference there and tried to pick up, throw it 20 yards down in front to get a pass interference 1st down. If Pittsburgh plays a little bit more successful and the defense misses a tackle and they gain 16 yards on a little dump off, which is very possible on 3rd and 25. Lots of teams do it consistently. They say just don't allow the 1st down. Now all of a sudden you're in, go for it on 4th down range. If they go for it with 2.5 minutes left and pick it up, the game is more than likely over. If the defense does not stop Pittsburgh, your offense will not touch the football again. There have been times, glaring times, where it just felt like there was mismanaged clock. As a coach, that's one of your biggest duties. And I do wonder what the spotlight is, what people think of Lou Anarumo if the Cincinnati Bengals in the 4th quarter come up clutch. My biggest fear right now is this is a Marvin Lewis type of team, mentality team in the big games, except they have Joe frickin' Burrow. Because we've seen it again. There was drop passes. 2 weeks ago was the drop passes. Joe Burrow's playing astonishing drop passes. This week it was the penalties. Joe Burrow, there's always the one consistent thing. Joe Burrow is just playing out of his mind. But then there's 1 week it's fumbles, 1 week it's missed field goals, 1 week it's penalties, 1 week it's drop passes. There's something different. And it's always against the good teams. And that, to me, you think, you remember this, you remember the Marvin Lewis era. What made this era so special is they could win the big games. And not only big games, but the primetime games. But now you start to see the season. It's been hard for me to unsee that and say, man, is this team Are we getting bamboozled? Is it getting covered up because of Joe Burrow? But is that what Zach Taylor is? Just another guy that can't, get the confidence, play clutch football, win the big games, get his guys riled up and ready to go for the big games? Time will tell. Again, I like that they did some overhaul here. I think Frank Pollock, as much as we brought him back that he'd be all right, he's got to go because the offensive line still struggled. Defense hasn't developed any players. Lou's got to go, understandably so. You want to work on a defensive line, no pass rush, defensive line coach got to go. Sure, that's great. We'll see. I hope I'm wrong on this one because I know how the Bengals at this point is clear they want to keep Zach around. So hopefully I'm wrong. They bring in new coaches and things change. I just find it hard to believe, but we're going to pin all the blame on Lou Anarumo. Lou Anarumo's defense, who, by the way, I'm not done. I'm sorry. This is Lou Anarumo's defense's fault. That the Bengals start 0-2 every season. The defense that allowed 16 points, forced a bunch of field goals week 1. The defense that forced 3 turnovers against the back-to-back defending world champions. You picked off Patrick Mahomes 2 times. You forced a fumble. If you turn over the Kansas City Chiefs 3 times and cannot win the football game, and you want to tell me that's the defense's fault? Wow. Forget about the 4th and 16. The crazy thing is, and I understand, I'm the same exact way. We're all the same way. We kind of remember the big plays at the end of the games. What's happened at the end of the games? Or the bigger, sometimes it's easy to look and say, well, 35 points, that's a defense's fault. 2015, wild card round, Pittsburgh. Vontaze Burfict KOs Antonio Brown. Pac-Man Jones takes the unsportsmanlike conduct penalty. Pittsburgh's in field goal range, game's over. Never forget it. You'll never forget that is how the Cincinnati Bengals lost that football game. But is that really how they lost that football game? No. Because 2 drive befores, Vontaze Burfict ended the game. Picked off, Big Ben, game's over. Run the clock out. Jeremy Hill fumbles, gives them the ball back. The Cincinnati Bengals fumbled the football 4 times in that football game, threw 1 interception, and you and me look back on that game and blame the defense. Is it really the defense's fault? And I think that's the bigger picture here is absolutely, you can say the Cincinnati Bengals defense was giving up a lot of points in games they probably should not have given up this season. They was giving up a lot of yards they could not get off the football field. But how many games was there we blamed the defense and it wasn't the defense's fault? You win one of those 2 games, the first 2 games of the season, if the offense puts points up, you're in the playoffs. Your offense puts up points once on 3 tries against the worst pass defense in the league. Once in 3 tries, you beat the Ravens, you're in playoffs. Bye week, Pittsburgh. You got 44 to Russell Wilson. Sure. You blame the defense on that one all day. Can't blame the defense for the Denver game. Sure, they give the points late. I mean, that's the best pass protection unit in the league is Denver. I'm surprised they didn't give it. I was impressed with how that defense played in the first half, knowing how much the Bengals can't rush their quarterback, and knowing Denver had the best pass blocking offensive line in the league. You give that guy that kind of time with the Bengals secondary all beaten up. I mean, you consider this one. No Jesse Bates, no DJ Reader. You replace them with nobody. Geno Stone, statistically one of the worst safeties in the league. You lose Logan Wilson, your core man in the middle of the field, rest of the season. Dax Hill gone. Yeah, the injuries piling up. Sheldon Rankins never really was here. And somehow your defense finds a way to keep you in these last 2 football games. I thought if anybody saved their job these last 2 weeks, it was Lou Anarumo. Not Zach Taylor. We don't, that's the thing. Perspective is everything. Again, Lou can go. I understand it. I understand the decision completely. I'm not going to sit here and beg for Lou's job back. Again, if you had 6 years to try to figure it out, really couldn't develop players, really never once had a top 5 scoring defense, if I ain't mistaken. Not a lot of yards per game. They might have had the 1 year, but to kind of go from like down here, peak shortly, and then go back down here, makes it almost feel like more of an anomaly, an outlier. That 1 really good year was that 1.5 really good years. Because it was so, even especially when he came in, took the Marvin Lewis team over. Marvin Lewis, who, historically was pretty solid defensively. He came in and showed the Bengals a historically bad defense. and then you came in, kind of fixed it a little bit, and went right back downhill. I think that tells you a lot. I think it tells you, minus Jesse Bates, Lou Anarumo needs a team of veterans. He doesn't do so well with the young guys, and that's not the formula of success in the NFL. You have to be able to draft guys. You have to be able to use those drafted players. You have to be able to develop them, because you can't afford. And that's the thing. A lot of people say the Browns are cheap. If the Browns are cheap because they want to hire scouts, absolutely. If the Browns are cheap because they won't fix this or fix that and pay for this or that, you want to call them cheap? Absolutely. But if you're going to call the Browns cheap because they won't spend money on the team that make them better, that's not right. They had $9 million in cap space this season. They couldn't afford to sign anybody else. The problem is, when you don't draft players and you don't develop them, you're forced to pay free agent price tags, the premium of all of these players, and you just can't build a football team like that. You have to have these kinds of kind of players. You have to have the Jamar Chases under these draft contract deals. You have to have, Cordell Volson was supposed to, if Cordell Volson became a solid starter, those are the kind of pieces you add in the draft that build a team into a legitimate Super Bowl contender. You have to have those guys. And again, Lou could not put those guys on the field and utilize them. And he had to have BJ Hill, Trey Hendrickson, Sam Hubbard, Sheldon Rankins. He had to pay for every single defensive lineman. Couldn't get one on a lower deal. Same in the secondary. Same with the linebackers, right? Jermaine Pratt, Logan Wilson, Geno Stone coming out of there, whatever. If you have to do that, Von Bell was, when they signed him, when the defense was good, Von Bell, if you have to do that, that's not a recipe for success. And you can see why you got to move on. I just, again, hope everything works out for this Bengals team, and hopefully I'm wrong. And the new coaching regime comes in, and you know what? We forget all about these other concerns the Bengals had this season, and they elevate into a dominant Super Bowl contender again. Love to hear y'all's thoughts. As always, if you enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate you consider subscribing, like. You never have to. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.